Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are what I hope is the final stretch of database integration for version 12 of Wolfram Language. And we are looking at some documentation of various symbols. Okay, so let's look at the guide pages first. So we think we finished these guide pages, is that correct?
Yes, the ones you haven't looked at all are the new symbols.
Okay, all right, fine. All right, let's start at the top, database reference. So did I write these, or were they written not by me at all?
This we wrote, but you already changed them, so should be pretty much fine. The one that ended entity class, you haven't really looked at much.
Okay, all right, okay. So this here, that we never say it this way. What? No. Look, listen, if this is being presented this way, then the dummy elements here should be in italics. Okay? Do you get what I'm saying? So like,
yeah,
that should be italics.
It was in italic before, and then you said it should look like literal input.
No. The part of it that is literal input should look like literal input.
Okay, I'll change it.
Everything you explicitly type should be in literal input style. Everything that you don't should be in italics.
I can make that change.
Okay, so where are you telling people what the possible settings for backend are?
I'm not here. I maybe we should add it, I guess.
Okay, we need to do that. So let's. Okay, we got to rush forward a little bit. So we really want to call it backend.
I would think so, because in this context, it's really the backend, not the dialect.
Well, then, but you just say dialect in the description here.
No, it's not the dialect here. It's the backhand here.
Okay, but you say dialect, so you don't mean that. Okay, possible elements. So do you typically have to specify all of these?
For all of them, yes, except for SQLite that doesn't use a server. This is just a file.
Okay.
Well, also port is often a default port, so port is not.
So what is the default port?
It depends on the database. So
okay. So in this table, should we give typical elements in a SOC? So hold on a second. Where do you give the options? If you've given this URL, how do you then give the username and password?
With that specification, first user message.
I don't understand. So wait a minute. These are ones without passwords when you just give the URL. Is that correct?
No, you can encode the password in the URL.
I see. But so one of the things we're planning, okay, what about an authentication option for database reference?
So we looked into that, and it's the stuff that we would need, which is keychain, will not make it in 12.
Well, but you could. People are going to burn their passwords in anyway, so you might as well. It's not keychain. Keychain is to hide the passwords, but if you're prepared to burn them in, you can just say database reference authentication arrow blah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what we should support. We should support that, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Represents a reference to a local file-based SQL database. Represents a reference to a remote SQL. Okay, so then let's say database reference. Well, does it? I don't know whether this is correct. I'm going to put this in, has the option authentication, which I'm going to futurize this, which can be used to specify username and password information. for the remote database. Well, I'm just going to futurize this for now. Okay, you should figure out what to do there. In database, typical elements of our SOC include. Okay, and then we're going to give more detail here about what to do. Okay, so I really do not like the term backend unless you're saying the type of SQL backend used. And examples are what?
So SQLite.
Okay.
Postgres.
So let's say possible values for backend include quotes what?
SQLite. Yeah, but I don't know if it's camel case like that.
Okay, tell me how to
remember.
Tell me how to type these, because I want to know what the actual strings are here.
Ricardo
I think
knows.
they're lowercased.
Which?
SQLite and the others.
Okay, so it's like this. Is that right? Is that how you write it?
S should also be small.
No. We don't do it that way. These are our names, right? Did you get what I'm saying? These are our names, so we get to specify how these get written. No, I was exactly correct with my capitalization. Excuse me.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm looking at its freaking homepage.
Strange. I was sure it's
there it is. There's its homepage.
Yes, the names are like that. So would you like the names to be exactly matching the names?
Okay, tell me. Yes, I think that one should be.
But Stephen, there is one thing which is confusing, which is when you type it in as a URL with backend as the protocol, even if HTTP is, I mean, we don't usually write HTTP all caps in a URL.
You know what? This should be our canonical.
We are matching lowercase in any case.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay. But the autocomplete should be for this, and make sure there is an autocomplete, right?
Okay.
In that association. The type of SQL back. Okay, what are the other ones?
Postgres.
How's that? Do I have to type?
Is it Postgres SQL, Ricardo?
Checking.
Yeah, it is. It's Postgres. Okay, you guys are going to give me a list of what's here. Okay.
Okay. MySQL.
No. I know. Just put it in the chat. Okay. Type it and put it in the chat. Meanwhile, I'm going to go on with other stuff. Okay. Okay. So where does the name of the database show up? Oh, it's there, right? It's under that name field there. The name of the database. Name of the database or the path to it. Okay, and I'm going to explain that. Okay, the host, the internet host, is that right? What is the what does host mean here? Can it be the name of a single can it be a single machine name, or what can it be?
It's a server, so basically it can be either local host or IP address, or it can also be the usual like DNS name of the server if it's over the internet, because it can also be a local machine or a network.
Ricardo, make sure we support also Microsoft spelled out, not just MS SQL, because MS doesn't sound very official.
Okay. So, okay, I'm not going to go and do the details here of correctly fontifying these things. I'm going to let somebody else do that, okay? Okay. All right, so let's keep going down here. Okay, the name of the database or path to it. The host serving the database.
Actually, a remote database is probably wrong because it can also be on the same machine.
Okay, well, so what does host mean on the same machine?
It's just a local host, which is typically a 127.0.0.1.
Yeah, right.
Maybe instead of remote, you should say server-based.
I didn't say anything. I said the host serving the database.
Remote in the second usage message.
Okay. Represents. What are you suggesting?
Probably server-based, right, Carl?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the host serving the database, the port, the server port through which the database is accessed.
Should we put a parent saying that if it's the default for that specific backend, it doesn't need to be specified?
Well, we could put a default column here, but I think let's not do that. Used the username used to authenticate the database. It's not necessarily a remote database, right?
Yeah, it can be on the same machine.
Okay. Okay. So possible values for backend include possible values for name. Okay, for file-based databases such as SQLite, name gives the path to the file containing the database.
Correct.
For server-based databases.
You type served.
Thank you.
Are you hungry?
No, I'm actually not. For server-based databases, name. Okay, so now you've told me there's several possibilities. It could be an IP address.
No, that's host.
Okay.
So basically, when you have a remote database, a single database endpoint with the same password can contain multiple databases. So name host tells you which server, and name tells you which database.
gives the name of the database at a particular, what should we say, at the specified endpoint?
Yeah, I guess that's fine.
Okay. The value for host for value for file-based databases, no values need to be specified. No values need to be specified for host and port. For server-based databases, host can be given as a URL string or as a
I don't think URL string is correct, because it's not. You cannot have a path. You cannot have. I mean, it's just a host, really. So it can be an IP address or a named host.
Okay, but it's an internet host, isn't it?
Yeah. But URL also.
Okay, fine. As a given host can be an internet host name, can be a domain name, can be an internet host name, or an IP address specified in a string.
Don't put internet, put network instead of internet, because it will very often be in the same local network.
Okay, specified with a string or using an IP address object. Right?
I don't know if we ever implemented IP address, but we'll fix that.
Okay. Each type of backend, let's see, the value for the default value for port, if port is not specified, the default value will be used for each type of backend. No value for port specified, a default for each type of backend will be used. Okay. I think that's about it for that table. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Gives information about the database being referenced. The property prop can be, so you'd give automatic in the case where, or you would be missing not needed in the case where you'd ask for a host for a file back database. Is that correct? You'd give some kind of missing not needed or something, or not available. What do you do?
I have to check. Ricardo, do you remember?
Sorry, when we do what?
If you ask for the port for a file back database, what do you get?
I'm not sure.
But you get none. You get none.
In this case, do you
yeah.
You get none.
You get none.
Okay.
Because the default port.
That's fine.
Is,
That's fine. It's fine. Fine. Okay. Property prop can be any of the elements. Okay, so this point, okay, that point needs to be much higher up in this. Well, it represents a connection to a database. It does not, a potential connection to a database. Symbolically represents how a database should be, symbolically represents okay, wait a minute. Includes information on how to connect to a database, but does not actually perform the connection. What does perform the connection?
Calling database reference or connect.
What are you talking about? Relational database does the connection, doesn't it?
So if you wrap relational database around database reference, it will perform a connection to inspect it and then close it. Otherwise, you can explicitly call connect as a property.
What? What? That's not what this says. It says it represents a reference to a database. It doesn't say that some random string property of it is going to cause some state to change.
It's the last detail.
I'm understanding, but it's not right. It's not the right design. It's It's not at all the right design.
So
No,
how would
we went
how-
through this before. We went through this before, remember? Okay, that is not the right design. We cannot do it this way. This is a symbolic object that represents a database reference. It doesn't have. If we need, then we should have a thing called Database Connect that does that.
I mean, I don't think that database connect is very useful. Probably database disconnect can be useful in emergencies. Because for whatever reason, the process that's talking to the database dies in some weird way.
Okay, but wait a second. Wait a second. Are you expecting that anybody who uses database is going to use database reference brackets connect?
No. You 99% of the time you don't need any of that. But imagine you are connected because you're performing a query, and then your machine dies.
No. I'm not asking about that. How do you use this? So if you would say relational database of database reference, and that corresponds to the relational database, is that correct?
Yeah, that will inspect the database by connecting to it, get information on the schema, and then close the connection.
No, I understand that. But so
yeah.
what happens in other cases if I want to get entity value of whatever else?
Yeah, if you do entity value, the same thing. You have a connection that gets open for the time you need to perform the query, and then it gets closed. But if for whatever reason your connection goes down,
I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in a different thing. Saying connect here.
Connect is completely useless. Connect is completely useless because all these operations that you perform on the database perform a connection automatically and should disconnect if everything gets garbage collected properly. But if your machine dies completely in the middle of a query, we cannot guarantee that it closes. It will probably auto-close.
Also, when you are finished doing something, like at the end of the script, it's a good practice to close it. Of course, the connection
will have been closed anyway. Will have been closed anyway.
It should auto-close.
Well, it will auto-close if you kill the kernel. Yes. But if you don't quit the kernel, it won't close.
What are you talking about? I thought you just told me it opens, it does the query.
I thought so too, Ricardo. I thought that it opened and closed.
No, it wouldn't make sense to open and close it every time you're doing an operation.
Okay, so let's get it straight, please. Does it close it or does it not close it?
No, it does not.
Okay, so then
we can have option to handle those things, but by default, I don't think you should be closing it every time you are performing a query.
Oh gosh, how many more rocks are we going to have to turn over with this project? Come on, guys.
Well, Stephen, it's a complicated thing. There are different backends and different ways to connect. For example, there are connection pools in the database, and so they are managed by the database engine. And there are lots of details we're not exposing. So,
okay,
I think
includes information on how to connect to a database, but does not actually perform the connection. The connection is automatically performed. By functions like relational database, as well as by database querying functions.
there is only one, basically, entity value.
I know.
Entity
okay.
Such as entity value. Okay. Now, so in the workflow that you are recommending to people, they don't need to know about any of these things here, right?
Not necessarily any. Disconnect might be useful.
I think it's an unbelievable hack to have a property that masquerades.
I think we could define database connect and database disconnect, but they will not be used very often.
I think we should. Can be any of the elements. Available in database reference of a sock. So you're going to have to make a a pull request for we're going to add these database connect, database disconnect. Can be any of the elements that can be supplied as well as there is an active connection to the database. Well, okay. So we got to add database connect, database disconnect. So these things both refer to can they refer to relational database or database reference? Which one, or either?
Probably database reference.
I mean, they typically work on database reference, but they can also work directly on relational database as a convenience.
Activates a connection to the database DB. The database DB can be specified using database reference or relational database. Okay. Functions such as relational database and entity value automatically connect to databases as needed. Anything else we should refer to here? Anything else we should refer to there, please?
What does it return?
Success and failure.
Right.
Okay. Unless it should return, I think it should just return success or failure. It could return the name of the database, but I don't think that makes sense.
No, I think it's better.
Disconnects, deactivates. Should we say deactivates a connection to the database DB?
I will mention the fact that if you are already connected, it doesn't fail. And if you are not connected, disconnected does not fail. Or
sorry, what are you saying? Database disconnect if it?
I mean, there are two possibilities, right? Either you're connected or disconnected. You're running database disconnect.
Okay, so if you're not already connected, what happens?
Yeah.
So can you answer that question, please?
It's up to us. It's up to us. I mean, I can say, I can return a success.
I would return.
database disconnected, even if you are maybe.
I wouldn't do that. I would return a failure
message.
that just says database wasn't connected. I would give positive feedback on whether it was connected or not.
Well, we can return two different kind of success.
Yeah,
One
that's right. That's right. Exactly.
But still a success, right? I mean, in both cases.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Manually connect, comma, disconnect from a database. Okay, Carl on a live stream is asking, could you do something with database connect, blah, 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 that auto closes the connection at the end of the block? And saying it's a common metaphor in other languages, but not in ours.
Well, there are things like block which can be easily programmed by.
No, but the question is, how do you auto close the connection? Should we have a thing called database block that auto opens, auto closes?
That might be useful if we can always guarantee that.
That it closes. Well, that's up to you. By the way, that comma, Andrea, will be incorrectly formatted there.
No, I think it's something we need to think about. I will not exclude it. I mean, it sounds like a nice idea.
Okay.
Right, I think we should design it in sync with.
Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's move on. We've got a lot to cover. Yeah. Database disconnect returns a success object if it's successfully disconnected, or if the database was not. I think we should just say this. And we should always return a failure object if it either wasn't connected or the database couldn't be found or any other such problem. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Oh my gosh, there are no C alsos here. How could that be? So database reference, database connect. And then we also need to say entity register, right? Maybe, I don't know. Is that relevant to this?
Maybe entity store. I think entity store is more relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. And URL maybe? Not very profound, but those are probably relevant somewhere. Okay, all right, relational database we're on to now. Oh boy. I want to look at some of these other ones as well. Extracts the schema. What does that mean, extracts the schema? What does it actually return?
Returns itself.
That it represents the schema.
The thing is, Stephen, that when it's applied to
but please don't use find file, by the way. I mean, why are you having to use that? Doesn't it have a path? Okay,
yeah,
so that's
a
good question. Hold on a second. Does this respect $path when you give the name of a file? In this case, does it respect $path to find the file?
Okay, so the question is this: if you have the file wrapper then you cannot use example data. Because
Why?
file doesn't call find file. I think we went through this before for interpreter. So we can if you use just a bare string, we could do find file automatically, but not within file, because file is completely inert, and so it cannot have weird evaluation semantics.
Okay, so do we think the database reference should allow a naked string or not?
I mean, it does right now, but
well, you didn't document that.
No, we didn't document it because it's a convenience. Because we weren't 100% sure that there were going to be no collisions between various URL schemes and so on.
Oh my gosh. So wait a minute. So you're telling me in here, I'm going to futurize this, but it's something that says of quotes path, right?
Yeah, or even the naked URL, it could be.
Well, I understand that, but it can be a path. It can be either a URL or another kind of path.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to resolve, Andrea. I mean, this is part of the to-do list. I mean, we need to resolve, but not for version 12.0. What's going to happen with that? Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, database reference is its own constructor. So you give it the file path, database, relational database, and then it becomes a big complicated association with the database reference as the second argument.
Database reference. What? Sorry. So in this case, right? So this is now, what on earth is that? What is that error? Okay, so there's a database. There are its pieces.
Yeah.
Whatever it's got in it. Right? Okay, so this is look. No. Represents the schema of the database described by database reference, referenced by database reference. Okay?
How do people know that this thing evaluates to something else?
It doesn't evaluate to anything else. It evaluates
does.
to itself. Look, it evaluates to itself.
Yeah, but if you look at the input form, it's not the same at all.
I don't care. It's
Okay.
still okay. But it doesn't extract the schema because it doesn't return something different.
But Stephen, I think it's important to explain to people that relational database of a database reference is performing a side effect and calling something on the network.
I understand that. Yeah. Okay, so schema extracted from the database represents schema
I mean, if we had enough space, the correct thing to say would be that relational database of database reference evaluates to a representation of the schema.
No, because, well, I see. So the right way to do this is yeah, okay. So the thing is we have a missing line here. Represents schema represents schema information about a relational database. It's a basic point, right? In fact, that arguably should be the first thing here. Let's see whether this works. I bet it won't work. Oh, I was wrong. Okay, represents schema information about a relational database. Okay. gives the complete schema of the database referenced by gives the schema gives schema information related to the tables, table I. Okay. Oh gosh, look at this. You've also got these cases here.
Yeah, but those are mostly a convenience. I mean,
Well, I don't care. The documentation should be specifying that, right? I think we should say this, and then we should fill in that says database reference later. Okay. Boy, I hope not every one of these pages is this messy. We're not getting off to a good start here. The database can be specified using database reference URL or file right? What is all this stuff? What is this? We've never looked at this, and there are no CLSOs here, by the way. Oh my gosh. What should we reference here? Entity list, entity value, what should we reference here?
entity store.
Database reference, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, so Carl on our live stream is concerned about how the notebook front end will perform when there are hundreds of columns in a database, in a table rather. Have we tried that? In this case here, where this thing here opens up, have we done a test of this, where there's a huge number of columns here?
We haven't done such tests yet.
Could you make sure that QA is aware of the issue?
Yeah.
This is very frustrating that this is so messy. I mean, how bad are these other things going to be? Let's just look at one of them just to get a sense of that. So I wrote the usage parts, yes or no?
No, I did. But at least here I added keywords and CLSOs and examples. So.
No, this is no good. This is no good. Listen, one of the rules here is if you read this line in the documentation, you've got to be able to know what this is. I mean, for all I know, this is a piece of, that gives the articulation of different kinds of mammals, right? Represents class sorted according to the value of the property. Okay, foot of, I don't know what this is, right? It has to say
entity.
Yeah, somewhere it has to talk about the fact that it's an entity. It relates to entities. Represents class I'm not even sure how to word this. Whew.
Represents entity class.
Okay, represents an entity class derived from class by sorting according to those values. I think that's the correct way to say it. Is that right, Carlo?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Sorts, I don't know how we usually say this, sorts successively by, well, sorts.
Well, the other properties are used as a tiebreakers, basically. So,
Yeah. Oh my, we're already at time for this meeting. Fortunately, I think I can go into the time for the next one. Okay. Okay, well, let's go back here. So we're clearly going to have some time. So there's some rewording here that's going to be needed. Represents an entity class derived from class. Okay, so this has to say that it by default is ascending, right?
yes.
Well, it defaults the same way that sort defaults.
Sort by.
Okay, how does this multi thing like this relate to how sort by works? Does sort by allow that possibility of multiple tie-breaking things?
Yeah, it does. I don't know why it's not properly documented in user
It's
message,
not documented.
but it does.
That's a sort details note.
That should probably be in the main documentation.
I agree.
You know what? I'm going to move this to a second element here. And I have no idea how to put in a 7+. Andrea, could you get somebody to put in a 7+ for that?
Yes.
Maybe we should call this F spec. No. How does this work? So it applies. So there should be a case where it says F1, F2, comma P. Is that correct?
I don't know, because we were talking about this at some point in ILT, because it's kind of dumb that there's only one P for multiple Fs. So I don't even know if it works.
Okay, so can we determine that, please? But at least we've documented this case here. By successively using the values of the properties prop I.
I think that's prop 1.
Should say prop I, shouldn't it? I think that's not correctly formatted there. I don't think that worked correctly, Andrea. That's another thing for you to chase.
Okay.
You get it?
Yes.
Now, you know, this sort by, this specification thing of ascending, descending probably should be supported also by sort by.
I brought that up like 1 year ago. And
well, we've also got reverse sort by, haven't we?
yeah. But that's also global.
I understand, but sorting up. Oh boy. Okay, a good ILD topic. Let's cover that there. Okay. No, this isn't correct. Wait a minute. Sorts according to the prop I. Well, by the way, do you also support prop arrow? Yes, you do. But you don't tell anybody that. You don't say prop arrow spec here, right?
No.
Come on.
So what you're saying is that we should first say prop arrow spec and then just say prop spec in the following one.
No, I don't think so. I think we should do this. Okay, class prop arrow spec. Sorts. Well, if this is going to be sorts according to prop in the order specified. Okay, so here,
Maybe this one and the previous one can be merged into one because it can be with or without specified order.
let's not do that. Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Let's say that.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's go back over here. Table level properties. Is this really consistent to say foreign primary key, the list of columns, even though it's singular?
Yes. So the primary key is always only one, even though it might reference multiple columns. I mean, a key is not a column. A key might be multiple columns. And so primary key can contain multiple columns, and each foreign key can contain multiple columns. There's a typo there. It says foreign key instead of foreign keys.
Here, okay.
Yeah.
Gives a list of associations to the following elements. Wait a minute. What's the name of each? Gives a list of associations. Okay. Okay, so if I go over here to our handy little example, where was it? Here. Okay, so you are saying if I say, okay, tables. So if I say %1 subtables. Okay, now I say %1 sub employees, comma, primary key, employee number. Okay, so now I say, okay, so if I say foreign keys, okay, but this is within one schema. These foreign keys are pointing off to those places. Fair enough. Wait a minute. No, we cannot call this backend type. We should just call it type.
I wouldn't do that.
Well,
here's why. So
native type.
Native type is fine.
Don't you want to qualify these a little bit more? I mean, if you see something that says, okay, so if I say here, okay, so I'm going to give a column here. Wait a minute. I've got a table, employees. I didn't even ask for columns. Okay, so let's say extension. So here, what did that do?
Nothing.
Oh,
You
because
should place extension in place of counts, yeah. And it should be lowercase, I think.
okay. Now, what should this do?
I mean, we could make this return an association, but the way
I don't see why we shouldn't make that return an association. I think it should.
the problem is that if that returns an association, then we end up with we can never have a column called columns, so we end up with reserved words. That's why I avoid it. Yeah,
I see. Okay. Well, then maybe we should have an all here.
I think that works. You can try to evaluate it.
Oh, fantastic. Then we should just document it, shouldn't we?
And I think it works at all levels.
Okay. So wait a minute. So then we say, then this would be what would I say here? An association containing all of column level properties. Right?
Yeah. It works also at table level properties. So under foreign keys, you can add another line.
No, here, right? If that was all. Yeah, right. That's what you mean. Shouldn't it work at the level of the top level? Who cares?
It's not very interesting. Maybe it does, but
okay. All right. Fine. So that is a native type there. Is that correct?
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's.
Why are we not using something more like the type specifier structure of the compiler?
So maybe Ricardo should speak to this. I was under the impression that this was going to be like some horrifying string like varchar 10.
We need to include both information. We haven't done that yet. We are not exposing the low-level type that is coming out.
Okay, then should this be called native type?
I mean, it's not quite the native type if it's string.
Well, no. The native type is something like varchar. And
okay, then what should this be called? Type.
And this is our type. Yes, this is our internal type. So string.
No, but it's not our type. It's not our type because our type would be something like somebody's switched on our type would be something like type specifier of blah blah blah, right?
Then don't document it.
Don't document what?
Don't document what we have right now as backend type because we will need to transform it into this type specifier and we didn't do it.
Well,
I mean,
maybe we should call. Are you going to expose varchar 10? Because I think you should.
Yeah, we are just not ready to do this right now. So maybe for version 1.
Well, but the verbatim string that comes out of the database we can expose, like varchar 10. But people will want to read that.
Yeah.
Not our normalization, which is not really normalized anyway.
Right. So you're saying we've got a partial normalization here that turns it into string comma 10.
Right. And we don't include the low-level type information. We could, but...
Okay, so what I'm suggesting native type is the native type of the data stored in the column, which would be varchar, quotes varchar 10 in this case, right? Now, what you're saying is there are two levels of cooking of that raw information. One is the string comma 10 level, right? So if I say... and probably all of these are just strings at this point, right? So, for example, let's find out how long a name I'm allowed to have. "50 characters. Wow. Okay. First name the same length? Can I be like one of those, well, it's multiple first names, one of those European royalty type things?
Or just Brazilian soccer player.
They have. Okay, well, I don't even know what last name means, and who knows? Okay.
Yeah, but I agree that the thing that we should be exposing, it's not our half-baked normalization.
Fine.
And you're right that there is like yet another level, which is more at the entity level, which is some stuff that will never be stored in the database, like quantity. But
I will not document native type or backend type if we are not sure about it.
No, Ricardo, native type is just fine. It's just not this. It's varchar 50 or whatever it is.
Right, but we also need that right now for the implementation into the object.
Yeah, but
What
let's
do we
not
do?
document what. Okay, let's call native type varchar 50, and we keep backend type not implemented. Sorry, not documented as our internal version of that. String
Well,
50.
let's call it. What should we call it? Normalized type. Okay, just because
If in the database reference we're calling it backend, then backend type should be varchar and stuff.
no, that should be native type. Look, backend type is the type of
But
backend.
we are using the word backend into database reference.
Yeah, but Ricardo, not as an
I
adjective.
only-
That's the complaint. The backend is not an adjective. If you say backend type, that means SQLite. It's
Right.
the type of the backend.
I think for the sake of generating something in this association, I would recommend that you call it normalized type. You have native type, which is varchar 20 or whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah,
how
but
it's written.
can we keep normalized type undocumented? Because I think
Yes, don't document
we
it.
will
I agree.
change it.
But
Okay, yeah.
I agree. Don't document it. But I'm saying that it will come out when you say all here.
No, it won't. It won't, because
Oh, okay,
only the
fine.
things that are
Fine.
explicitly in
Okay.
properties
All right.
come out.
Terrific. Then that's good. Then you just put it in, but don't document it. And don't document it. Don't disgorge it, etc. Okay. Okay. Question from Mohammed on the live stream: will there be a way to get generated SQL code that is sent to the back end? That is a good question. I was wondering that myself.
I mean, we do have the functionality to do that. We just don't have the hook in entity value to pull it out.
I think we should.
Yeah, I think like third argument to entity value, SQL string.
But there's also a complementary thing that would be useful once the SQL string is there, because just the raw result that you get back, you might need to transform in certain ways into the shape that you need.
Sorry, I'm trying to. You're saying that the modifier shouldn't be. Okay, you're saying entity value is the thing that actually goes in and does the SQL query. Okay, can you show me what some of these SQL strings look like? How do you get the SQL string right now?
We have a function which has not been completely polished, which I think is called. Okay, I'll check what the name is. It's undocumented. I'll wait a second.
Okay, but is it a single? Because entity value is a resolver, right? And arguably, this SQL string thing should also be a resolver. But somehow it needs to give.
It currently is a holding wrap around entity value,
What
which
is? Oh,
the
a held
function
wrap.
that I'm talking about.
Okay, well, what is it?
Yeah, one second.
Let's see. I mean, I'm kind of thinking. I would hate to use. I mean, SQL request could be a symbolic wrapper like a HTTP request. See what I'm saying? In other words, with all of our infrastructure, there's no reason why you can't send in a raw SQL request. Is that correct or is that crazy?
We have the infrastructure to do that. It's, I mean, I think it requires more careful design, because in general, you don't want to, I mean, it's considered bad form to have a single string that already contains the parameters. So it should be more like a template with an association that fills in the parameters.
I see.
So, I mean, it's not something that I would want to rush into 12.0.
Yeah, okay, fine. Look, I suggest what we do is provide a developer level function that extracts the SQL string. So what is the, and we should document it as a developer level function. Am I making sense? In the developer context. Or if you want, you could put it in the function repository, actually. That's fine too.
There was also another way to do it. It was completely different, but I think it's still useful as a developer function. It's like, each time a query is executed, you have a function that can log it. And so if you set this variable to echo or to print, in your current session, basically printing all the SQL query that are executed.
Well, I think what it should
And
be,
so-
look, I think what we should do is put in the function repository a function that is called something like, if we have something called SQL echo, right? And then it's a wrapper around entity value and so on. An SQL echo would echo the SQL queries as they are executed. So SQL echo would be a controlled evaluation of anything it contains. And then
it should probably be called SQL echo block, but
why?
Because echo is not a controlled evaluation of anything. It just takes something and echoes it. This is
No, it doesn't.
Whole thing.
Oh, I
It
see. It
modifies
evaluates.
the-
I get it. I see. I understand. Okay. Yeah, you're right. And this would be SQL query string. So I think you should implement those two things as function repository functions. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that would be very useful. And they will be, they're in the function repository, so they are what they are. They're not guaranteed to stay quite the same, and so on.
Okay.
But I think that's definitely useful. I mean, I would even argue that those are, well, let's put them in the function repository. See what happens with them. Okay, got the names and things. Yes, I can delete this file.
Yep.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm good with the rest of this, which is nice. Let's see. What else should we mention here under relational database? Should we point people to probably entity store? We already did. Anything else here? Oh, okay. I mean, this clearly should point to database link, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Look, I think we're going to have to wrap here. Let me just take a look. Hold on. Let me look at my schedule for a second. Oh boy. Yeah.
Well, I think that the example, I mean, I would try to rewrite this with less repetition, and will go much faster in the usage messages.
Okay.
But I suggest we close
Well,
now.
this isn't bad. I mean, I would.
I think this one is the only one that you had already looked at, because we changed.
Oh.
No. This is not the one we looked at. It was the entity class that we looked at, not filtered.
Okay, but this, I think, should just say, I mean, this has to be, okay, but you've got to say.
You're
What's
not
that?
saying what f is. I mean, if you put a pure function or down values there, it's not going to work.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But what about for a regular in-memory entity store?
I think, I mean, in that case, you can always wrap your pure function or down values in entity function, but entity function has kind of peculiar semantics. So I wouldn't want to use a naked down value there.
Even for an in-memory entity store?
Yeah. I mean, you can make a trivial wrap around any function in a memory entity store.
Surely filtered entity class wants to reference sampled entity class.
I don't know, does select mention take?
I don't know, but this seems relevant in this world to do that. All right. Okay. I think that's as far as we're going to get today. Let's hope that there are no further. I don't think there are going to be other design changes. We've gone through the design of these functions quite carefully. Agreed?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, so do I.
Yeah, the thing that we will need to discuss is the type system, and that is relevant when we start the next discussion about writing to database and so on.
The type system, you said.
Right.
That's a totally different issue. I mean,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, basically, before you even say anything about that, it really has just got to align with the type system we're using for the compiler. So go learn about that if you don't know about it. Do you already know about it?
I know something about it,
different.
and I'm not convinced that that's gonna align.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Stephen, it's very different, and we already discussed that. In the past.
Explain.
So, for example, just to give an example, the type system for the compiler right now doesn't allow anything like association. And internally, we do support it through
I'm sorry, the
compound
type
element.
system for what?
For the compiler doesn't support association, for example.
Well, but it's obviously got to, doesn't it?
I don't know.
Well, obviously it's got to, because it's part of the
Also,
language, and the
Stephen,
compiler is supposed to compile the language. So
Stephen, the other
that's
thing is that the other thing is that the type specification for database is gonna somewhat look closer to the one in interpreter, because you're gonna have things like a date represented as a Unix time. That's the kind of types we want for the high level stuff.
Okay. You need to talk to Tom and the people working on the compiler.
Sure.
I mean, and this argument that the compiler doesn't support associations is really
No,
stupid.
what
Still,
I mean,
there is a better argument, really, and that is that the compiler that Tom works on and what we are doing are solving very, very different problems, because we are compiling to a language of the same level of expressiveness as Wolfram language itself, while compiler is compiling to a strictly lower level language. And that makes a huge difference. It's
Well, excuse me. I mean, as you've just pointed out, like in Wolfram language, we can express, a quantity of mass in kilograms or something, right?
Yes.
We can't do that in SQL.
We can.
Yes.
And
How?
I mean,
How?
You can by multiple columns.
That's not the native type.
So yeah, of course, that's the point. The point is that this looks much more like the type system of interpreter, in that it's all a serializing and deserializing specification.
Well, what I would think it is, it's more like what we have in data drop. That's what I would look at.
Right? What we have in data drop is interpreter.
I understand, but what you're saying, okay, that one of the points is in interpreter. Okay, so the database is the sort of unwashed external thing that is just a string, which interpreter maps to a mass quantity, for example.
Yeah.
Right,
it's a bit richer than interpreter, because we will also need to know how to turn a washed quantity into an unwashed number.
So remember also, Stephen,
deserializer.
Sorry. There is also a very practical reason why you want to do it very similar to interpreter. You want to automatically create a form that insert data into the database, for example. And in order to do that, the system needs to be consistent with that. Still, we can always have a way to transfer from one type to the other. But yeah. I mean, in a dry application, you should be allowed to specify like a person type, and then you can automatically create a table. You can automatically create a form to insert data, and the specification should be the same.
Okay, hey, a couple of comments on the live stream from Carl. Why aren't we having database query echo? Because Actually, that's even wrong. I mean, these are, look, this is just function repository stuff. SQL. Yeah, I mean, actually, question for Tony. For the Sparkle query stuff, is there also an echoable string there?
So Sparkle query and update strings are fully supported in import and export. So you can go both ways.
So wait a minute, you take a query, you take one of the query objects, and you just do an import on it.
Yes, or if you have a symbolic Sparkle query or update string, you pass it to export string to see how the string would look like.
Okay, so why can't we do that for the database, for the relational database case?
Because we are working at a much higher level. That's the problem. We, like Tony has introduced, I don't know how many new symbols for dealing with low-level Sparkle stuff. We haven't, and SQL works basically just transparently as any other entity. So we don't have dedicated heads to do this stuff. That's the problem.
Right. I mean, if we start designing a way to expose the database functionalities, yeah, we can discuss about this stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. So it's a different thing because those databases, you're saying there's a direct symbolic representation of the query.
So, Stephen, the way it works is like this. Basically, right now we have entities compiled to an intermediate language that kind of looks like the Sparkle one that Tony has exposed. And that language is going to be the common target when we want to expose, for example, querying through database query language. Dataset query language. Then it's also going to compile to that common thing. So this intermediate layer that is closer to SQL than it is to entities, it's currently only internal.
But it's not really something, I mean, it's really similar to what we're doing with entities. We basically have one head that is called, instead of being entity filtered class, we have database filtered, and so on and so forth. There is really a one-to-one correspondency between entity functions and database functions. And then, of course, we have other stuff.
What are these database functions used for other than your internal implementation?
Only our it's basically our compilation target.
But when we are capable of doing L value, I mean, is our idea, and I don't want to talk about this at great length right now, but is our idea for database updating to essentially have an L value structure that is similar to, I mean, we do have an L value mechanism for entity store, don't we?
Yeah, but I think that we need to dress this up in some way, because if you start doing things entity by entity, it's going to be terrible for performance, atomicity, and so on. So we need to really think closely on how to do locks and stuff like that. You don't want to use
no, I understand.
Map and set to do this stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right. Well, great. Okay, to be continued. Thanks, guys. And I think we will need another. Unfortunately, I thought this was going to be our last version 12 database meeting, but I think we will need one more. Yeah, there it is. But if you can make the changes, I'll push these changes back. If you can make the obvious cosmetic changes, that would be helpful. And don't forget to do the updates that you need. And Andrea, don't forget the formatting things.
Yeah. I opened 5 bugs during this meeting, so
okay,
we have notes.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks also, folks on live stream. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.